Okay, feedback for Thanim Hussain. Little bit concerned because this is actually the second brief that you emailed us, and yet it feels very mixed. It's got some contrasting elements. There's some things missing that I'd expect to be in here, and the quality of some of your reference sources are a bit concerning as well. So Matt and I discussed it. At the moment, we're saying it's tentative, as in we need more from you. This isn't a sufficient brief at the moment. You've stated no poly counts.
Yeah, there's some interesting choices in the way that you've structured what you're going to do, saying there's going to be no poly limit because teachers don't need it. There's going to be no texture limit. There's going to be no UV limit. It's like, no, that's part of game development. It's every single game engine in existence will limit the number of polys that you can have in a scene. So these are things that need to be thought through. What is your poly limit for the scene going to be? Even something that's saying something as simple as I'm going to work to next generation poly limits for game scenes would have been enough to say, okay, he's going to go off and research that and find out what current methods are. But you definitely need to have poly limits and texture limits.
You're kind of contradicting yourself as well, because you're saying there's no poly limit, and then the next minute you're saying this doesn't mean spending polys without any limits. So, this is what your whole brief reads like. You sort of say one thing one minute, I'm going to design this scene, and I'm going to make a video of the making of, but then it becomes a YouTube classroom inspiration for young people. So we're not sure if this is another brief or a couple of briefs that you are extracting ideas from, or whether you've come up with this completely yourself. Excuse me. But it doesn't seem fully conceived at the moment. So I think the feedback is this: we need to know exactly what you want to make, how big a scene is it going to be, one single creature, some ruins, what are there organic elements in here as well, fish and other things. When we're looking through the art that you provided, there's no singular art style. I appreciate this isn't your art style piece. This is sort of ideas about giant sea creatures and what have you. But we have totally different looking objects here. Stuff that looks semi-realistic, like perhaps this one here. And this almost looks like it might be underwater footage, right the way to stuff that clearly looks almost like a student project to me. Doesn't look tangible, this piece at all. Looks like it just happens to have been picked up and put underwater. There's no sign. If this had been under there for centuries, it wouldn't look so pristine. There was actually recently a documentary on, to remember, I think it was one of the BBC channels, about Napoli, and they've got some fascinating laser scanning, and they are actually looking at what often people consider to be the lost city of Atlantis, which is actually Herculaneum. So it's about Napoli, but Napoli is right on the Vesuvius volcano, and it's all about the history of Vesuvius. And there are actually three major sort of towns, each of which have been destroyed at different points, and Napoli today is built right on top of effectively a supervolcano. So there's a good chance at some point history will repeat itself. But that would be well worth looking at. They have a scene there where they go and find these sort of Roman playboy villas that are now under the ocean. So I think it needs more accurate reference material, more of a sense of art style. When I look at a few of your pieces, this is a pretty terrible bit of Photoshop, and I wouldn't say, Matt and I both sort of laughed when you were saying this is a good example of showing fishes interweaving with that, because it just looks like they've been laid over the top. So I think what we need, and the textures on this is just pretty shocking. So we need a better idea of what you're doing and of the scope of it, because these are pretty large scenes. And you may be better looking to create something smaller, like a diorama, like a slice of this city underwater.
I would completely agree, is that we need to scope what it is that you're going to make in the first place, and source some better references. What you're looking at isn't a good example of what you should be using as an example of what you should be making. As Graham said, a lot of it does look like student work as you scroll through, especially some of the ones in the last page.
Yeah, I mean, would that inspire you to go into games as a career?
Yeah.
I suspect not. So you remember that that's what you're trying to achieve. What I would say is, really, if your monster is the centerpiece, then that might shape the scaling of your environment. Because ultimately, if you want an absolutely massive sea monster, the only way you're going to be able to create that is by making the scene quite small relative to it, so that we get that sense of epic scale, that this is a 200-foot sea beast or something, which means the environment is going to need to be quite small, okay, like this or something, seen from a distance almost. Whereas on the other hand, if you're going for something a bit subtler, or one of these sort of Nautilus things, wherever it is, this one, then maybe it's not going to be so massive or something like that, in which case this could be living within a temple or something. So again, really you need to come back with a clearer sense of scale, some sketches perhaps, a tighter set of visual references that give us an idea what to expect. You know, this looks fairly realistic up to a point, maybe not the soft tissues, the way they just dissolve, but certainly the shell's fairly realistically textured. That's totally unrealistic. Some of these have an element of realism, some don't. We have the underwater thing. This is a totally different sort of sense. All these are painting, concept art type sea creatures. So I'm really, when I skim through this at the end, I have no idea concisely of exactly what it is you're going to produce.
Yeah, it reads as if you just want to do something that's underwater, and that's it. You're not quite sure yet. You're not sure what it is that you're going to be making. It does read as, I've had this idea of the sea creature, and that's as far as I've gone.
And I think you should be looking at existing sort of sea creatures, etc., as well in your reference, because you might show them in the scene, but you will also probably need to render them out with detail and textures, etc. So you need an idea of exactly what those are going to be, and you know, just a quick Google gives you a massive variety, as you can see in here. Okay, but ultimately we should be getting a strong idea of whether you're going for something that's supposed to be realistic or something that's more cartoon, and that's what we need. We need a sense of what the art style is going to be. Are we going realism? You know, this is a sea creature, but this is the sort of sea creature you'd probably get in How to Train Your Dragon. You know, so it's a different kind of take on it.
Yeah.
So we need an art style defined as well as the topic scoped a bit better. So there's still quite a lot to do. Okay, come up with realistic idea of the scale of what the object is, whether the creature or the environment is your focus. You know, there are ways of alluding to a creature without focusing on the creature. You could have a silhouetted shadow of a creature in the distance. If you actually want to model Atlantis, don't bother with the creature, perhaps. The other thing is you could model Atlantis, and in the center of Atlantis there could be a statue of the creature,
yeah,
which might fit in again, and it serves potentially two purposes. So there's a lot really that needs to be fleshed out.
So I would say for your first week back, come with a new proposal that has all of this stuff that we've been discussing thought through. A nice art style, a clearer definition of what you're going to make, and the submittables that you're going to produce.
And remember as well that we're looking for something that is small enough it can be well executed. Okay, so look at things like dioramas for games and stuff like that. There'll be these small little environments that are often horizontal slices. I've obviously keyworded this and got something quite different. But we might be dealing with something that is almost a tiny little cross-section of a bit of Atlantis or something like that, albeit in 3D. But you want something that is small enough you can model it really well. There's no point in having 1,000 buildings in your environment
that are all just blocks.
That are all, you know, rendered to the sort of quality of some of the pieces in here. You know, you could just duplicate this temple 1,000 times. It ain't going to make it any better. This one has much sort of greater sense of ruin to it and what have you, sense of history. This one has artifacts in it, so it's a nice blend between architecture and objects. So as I was saying, maybe you could do something like this, either with the shadow of the beast, or the beast cruising, or one of these statues or something like that. But we want a small slice, really well made, so that it proves you can do modelling, you can use the light settings, create the light rays. I think in the new version of Marmoset, at the end, you should have a Marmoset output as well as your Unreal. And you should be able to create these kind of light waves through the sea. Basically, plenty to get on with. Try and hit the ground running, get back to us as soon as possible with a revised brief. First week back, don't waste a week. Come prepared and sort this out quickly, and then show Matt regularly every week throughout the semester progress. Each week come say, this is what I've done since last week, Matt. Get feedback on it. There'll also be another tutor in the sessions as well with experience in the game industry, so get feedback from him. You'll have 2 people to hit up for feedback, and it's a week by week progression. Don't go 2 weeks without making progress on your project, okay? But start strong, don't run away from it, okay? Doesn't take much, just a bit of time, looking a bit harder for reference material,
yeah,
and then get going.